Hello and welcome to Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer. I am your host, Jeff Seltzer. If you listen or watch every week, thank you again so much for always coming back. It really means a lot to me. Really excited to have you along with me on this journey. If you're new to the pod, thank you so much for giving it a shot and checking it out. I think you'll have a lot of fun and enjoy the ride. Over the last couple of weeks, we've gotten a lot of new listeners, which I'm really, really excited about. Anybody that I can share my story with, share other people's stories with, kind of learn together. It really, really excites me. I'm really excited that this is happening. In the last week and a half, I posted to LinkedIn for the first time, which for me is not something that I do often. When I say the first time, I mean first time about something that's kind of a personal project, right? Oftentimes on LinkedIn, I'll post about if I'm trying to hire somebody or if I know somebody's trying to hire, or I know somebody's trying to get a job. I try to help out however I can and network with people. But this is the first time that I actually posted on LinkedIn about a personal project, which is this podcast. Wanted to help get the word out. On LinkedIn, I have probably 2,000 connections from all of my different jobs and everything I've done throughout my career. So I figured, why not share the podcast, help everybody know about this journey, and help everybody understand what project I'm working on here, which I'm really excited about. So if you did recently join after finding this podcast on LinkedIn, thank you so much. Really, really excited about it. Shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'd love to get you a sticker. Interact a little bit more also to find out what you think of the podcast, anything that you would like to hear more about on the podcast, if you want to be a guest, etc. So again, on Instagram, we are Everybody Has a Story Pod. Additionally, wanted to mention that last week's guest was Latanya Ford, which I really, really enjoyed the conversation. It was a lot of fun to learn more about Latanya, learn about her life, her journey, everything that makes her happy, and kind of what makes Latanya. As I do every week when I do post about the podcast, I kind of talk about it and promote that it's happening. I tagged her on Facebook, and then she reposted it, reshared it, and such like that. Interestingly enough, her husband's best friend's mom sent me a direct message afterwards to reach out and chat a little bit about the podcast, which I thought was really, really cool. She really enjoyed the podcast. She loved hearing Latanya and her story. Coincidentally, she's also from Edison, New Jersey, like myself. For me, I left Edison back in about 2002 or so. So right now it's about 22 years. I think she said she left Edison about 40 or something so years ago. So definitely a little before I did, probably a little bit after I was born. So definitely different decades there. But just really, really cool, and shows how much of a small world it is that her and I are both from the same town. I did also want to mention that she reached out and said that she does have a book that she's written called Wings of Resilience: Breaking the Chains by Francine Chapman. So full disclosure, I haven't read the book. I only heard about this a couple of days ago. But if you're looking for something to read or looking for something interesting, definitely go on Amazon, check it out, see what you can find. Again, the book is called Wings of Resilience: Breaking the Chains by Francine Chapman. Before getting into today's podcast, I wanted to go over my usual housekeeping. So as a reminder, as mentioned earlier, on Instagram, we are at Everybody Has a Story Pod. If you want to be a future guest, if you want to complain that you don't like my hat, if you think that I should shave more often, whatever it is, definitely send me a DM there. Additionally, you can check me out at Seltzer77. You can look at the official YouTube of the podcast at Everybody Has a Story Pod. If you want to email us directly, you can email us at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. I'll say recently I've gotten a lot of different emails, mostly solicitations. What's funny is I didn't even think about this when I first set this up, but this is why I set up a separate email versus using my personal email address, is that most of these emails I'm getting start off like really, really nice sounding, right? So I think about a month or so ago, I'd mentioned that somebody had reached out and was like, hey, you're the number 105 podcast in leisure on Apple, which sounds really awesome. I still haven't been able to quantify that or kind of double source that, but it's still cool to see. And then it kind of followed up with like, oh, you can buy all this data from us for such and such. Similar one again this week, although this week's I thought was really cool. I don't remember who it was by, and I'm not going to plug them at this point. But the email started off by talking about, hey, they saw that I have a podcast. We've already released 9 episodes, which is more than most podcasts, which really does intrigue me. Like I wonder the question of how many episodes does the average podcast eventually go, right? Podcasts start, and most podcasts end at some point, right? Like most podcasts won't go on forever. So it makes you wonder, 9, right? Do most people who start a podcast, do an episode or 2 and then stop, which I guess I could see. I mean, after going through the last, couple of months of working on a podcast, it is a lot of work. It is time consuming, right? So every week I'm getting a guest. I'm doing research on the guests, kind of putting together some questions, pre-producing, recording with them, scheduling the recording, editing, publishing, marketing it out, and then doing it all over again for the next week's podcast. So I'd wonder how many actually go beyond the couple of weeks. Coming into this project, I knew it would be fairly time consuming, but I was willing to accept it. I mean, at this point, this is episode 10. So, we've done this for about 2.5 months now. We'll see how long it goes on for. Hopefully, for quite some time, as long as it remains fun for me and is, makes people happy and such. That's definitely the goal here. So really cool. But again, as I was getting into there, I kind of had a bit of a sidetrack. The email is everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. And my personal website for all things Jeff Seltzer, you can find me over at jeffseltzer.com. Lastly, obviously you found us here wherever this podcast is. We can be found at Spotify, both video and audio. You can find the audio also at YouTube, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon. As of this past week, we're now in Pandora, which is pretty exciting. So I'm not sure if you guys know, Pandora for years was like a music and podcast app. SiriusXM bought them. We got ourselves up on Pandora. As of now, we are not syncing over or streaming on SiriusXM. I'm hopeful that with the purchase of Pandora by SiriusXM, they do eventually, because then we'd be on Sirius. But for right now, Pandora is our newest platform. So thank you so much for that. With that said, this is episode 10, which I'm super, super excited about, right? So we made it through 10 episodes. I guess in celebration, or I guess in trying something different, figured I would go for a solo pod this week. Recognizing that, if this is going to last 11 episodes or 150 episodes or whatever, it's going to get more and more challenging to find a guest every week, schedule a guest, etc. So figured I'd test this one out and see how I do with the solo pod. So much like everything else, after this episode's over, definitely leave me comments, shoot me a note, DM me, whatever, let me know what you think. We'll definitely have a slightly different vibe, I think, in terms of, just me talking to myself or me talking to you guys, I guess, versus talking to somebody else who I have to react off of, which, is a very different, setup here. One thing that I thought was pretty funny, I was talking with Marcus Brandon, a buddy of mine, this past week. He's been listening every week. So shout out to Marcus Brandon. Thanks for the support. When I mentioned to him that I was going to do a solo pod, he had said, well, that totally makes sense. And I was like, really? How so? He was like, well, every week you talk about how, on the podcast, you enjoy, connecting with people, talking to people, hearing their stories, maybe sharing some of your own. And he mentioned that I really haven't had much of a chance to share some of my own, right? Which in hindsight, I guess might be true, because I try to put most of the spotlight on my guests. So this week, we'll see how it goes. But the goal here is to largely share some stories of my own, right? So I, over the last couple of weeks, have written down a couple of random stories throughout my life that I think will be interesting. Probably shows a little bit of how I became the person that I am, and kind of like some of my quirks or whatever else like that. So again, try not to be too tough on me, but anything that you want to hear more about, or if you want a future pod that you want to hear more about some of these topics I talk about, definitely reach out. So first story I wanted to talk about was the legend of the other Jeff Seltzer. So you might have seen on some of my socials, or maybe not, that I do often refer to myself as the other Jeff Seltzer. I do say this is the Jeff Seltzer from Edison, not 90s track star from Old Bridge, New Jersey, which, out of context makes absolutely no sense. Like, why would I say that, and what does that even mean? So let me take a step back and give you a little background on myself. So growing up, I was never the most athletic person out there. Like, I tried, always did my best, tried to push myself, but I was, let's say, average to below average from an athletics perspective. Always small, usually fairly skinny. With that said, I mean, glasses, I couldn't really see that well. But with that said, not the most athletic person out there. I played baseball from kindergarten through 8th grade. After 8th grade, decided baseball was boring. I didn't want to do it anymore. I did make the all-star team once, I think in like maybe 5th or 6th grade, which was pretty cool. But overall, I mean, I was probably average to, average-ish, maybe slightly above average at baseball, but not enough that when high school started, I wanted to play baseball. So high school started, and I decided I wanted to join the tennis team, because I was like, hey, I'd like to try a sport. Let's try tennis. Obviously, I'd never played tennis before, and being who I am, I tried as much as I could, but it just wasn't really clicking for me. So it was what it was. So once the first meeting for the tennis tryouts freshman year, I think it was the spring of 1992, give or take, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, spring of 92. On day one, the coach said, okay, nobody gets cut from the tennis team. So I was like, this is awesome, right? Like, so I'm automatically on the freshman team. This is pretty cool, whatever, right? So And side note too, I bought my first tennis racket about 2 weeks before the tryout. So I never really played tennis before. Just bought a racket, went out there and figured, well, we'll see what happens. Coach said they wouldn't cut anybody, so I'm like, this is amazing. So me and another buddy of mine, Dan Doherty, we both tried out for the tennis team. He also had about as much experience as I did in tennis. Day 3 of tennis tryouts, I taught myself how to serve, which I'm sure was super, super impressive at the time. I'm sure it was an amazing serve. Day 4, me and Dan Doherty both got cut from the tennis team, which I was a little, I guess, surprised or disappointed initially because we were told they were not going to cut anybody. In hindsight, I had no business being there. Like, I was not good. But, being that he had said we weren't going to get cut, I was, I guess aiming on that. So that was what it was. Sophomore year, I decided, what is less likely to get cut than from the tennis team? I was like, track, right? They can get as many runners out there. Having an additional person doesn't really cost them anything. It's not like they have only a certain number of like seats or head count or whatever. So I tried out track. Did winter track, which was brutal. Back in the 90s, winter track was outside. So basically we're outside wearing t-shirts and shorts, running between like December, January, February. It was like 25, 30 degrees. Wasn't optimal. I did it. It was interesting. Not necessarily, I wasn't that good. I did make it to, I think, all counties for the county tournaments. That was largely because I ran the 2 mile. I don't think anybody else from my school, maybe one other person, was doing the 2 miles. So by default, I just made it into that. I came in dead last. So let's not kid anybody. I didn't do awesome. I didn't make it there based on my talent. I was there. I tried my hardest. What is what it was. Okay. So that's my background in sports. Now, let's fast forward to the end of sophomore year. So this is 1993. Yeah. So spring of 1993, I decided, I'm going to try the cross country team for the fall of 93. So I want to do cross country junior year, which cross country in most high schools takes place during the fall. So I show up for day 1 of the meetings, right? Because in the spring, they have meetings to kind of like sign up, register, whatever else like that. I walk in, coach is there. He's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, hey. He goes, what's your name? I go, my name's Jeff Seltzer. His eyes light up. Like, he looks at me as if, he just saw, I don't know, whatever it is that the guy likes. Like, he was super, super excited. He's like, Jeff Seltzer, it's great to meet you. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm like, thanks. Super excited to be here as well. Let's see what happens. So I sat down, didn't really think much of it. Okay, meeting happens. He talks about what's expected over the summer. He talks about the season coming up in the fall. And I'm like, okay, fantastic. Over the summer, we're supposed to send in postcards that say how far we've run over the summer. So over the summer, I was running. Again, not well, because I'm not much of a runner, or wasn't much of a runner. But I was getting the mileage in. So I was rollerblading a lot. I was biking. I was doing a lot of running. And I think I probably put in between, I guess, biking, skating, and running, close to 200 miles that summer. So sending in the postcards, all that stuff, whatever. Show up for first day of school junior year. At this point, see the coach again. He's like, Jeff Seltzer, this is great to see you again. Expect big things out of you. You're gonna do awesome things for our team this year. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Thank you for sharing. I'm excited to be here as well. This is awesome. So we all suit up. We put on our cross country outfits, t-shirts, shorts, whatever else it is. We do our stretching, whatever else like that. We get onto the track, and he says, okay, guys, just go out there and just run 2 miles. And we're like, okay, great. So we go out there, and I just come in dead last. Like, legitimately, there are, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. It's all four grades are there. And I'm just running, and I am out of breath, right? Like, not only am I in dead last, but like I am panting, and I look like I haven't run at all. Not in really any good condition to I guess, lead or carry a cross country team. I look over the coach, and he has this really weird look on his face. And at that point, I recognized, or I think I kind of started putting the things together and figuring it out. He didn't realize that I was the Jeff Seltzer that grew up and lives in Edison, New Jersey. Halfway across the county in Old Bridge. So there's another school. There's a school in Old Bridge called Madison Central High School. Coincidentally, the same year as me, so born in 1977, just like me, there was another Jeff Seltzer who was apparently like an all-state like track and cross-country star. So, putting it all together, I eventually recognized and talking to some other people that he thought that I was this other all-state athlete, Jeff Seltzer, who was going to carry the team. He thought that I transferred in. he thought that I was going to be the runner he was looking for, and he thought that I was going to be the captain and be the person that kind of took us to that next level. Which unfortunately for him, I'm not that Jeff Seltzer. Fortunately for me, I am also not that Jeff Seltzer. I guess I'm happy being the Jeff Seltzer that I am. So those of you at home playing the Jeff Seltzer drinking game, you're probably pretty loaded at this point. So funny thing about the other Jeff Seltzer. So I did end up meeting that other Jeff Seltzer about a year and a half later. So I think it was senior year of high school. I ended up going to probably like a Jewish youth group meeting or dance or whatever it is that we did back in high school. And coincidentally, one of my teachers that I went from my high school, Edison High School, her daughter, I think her and her daughter lived in Old Bridge, and her daughter was friends with the other Jeff Seltzer. So I was at this dance or whatever activity it was. So was my teacher's daughter, and so was the other Jeff Seltzer. So she briefly introduced the two of us. If this were 2020, I absolutely would have got a selfie or a picture with him. But back in 1994, you didn't necessarily walk around with cameras. So getting a picture of the two Jeff Seltzers wasn't really something that was going to happen. In hindsight, I wish I could have. It would definitely add a lot to the story and be really, really awesome. But unfortunately, I met him. We briefly chatted for 30 seconds, maybe. I mean, this was 30 plus years ago. So, I mean, a lot of the story could be the fantasy in my head, and maybe it's exaggerated. But I'd say about 60 to 70% of the story I can guarantee was right. Maybe some details were a little off, whatever. So met him there. A year later, I went to Rutgers, found out that he went to Brandeis College or University up in New England. And this was in 1995 when email was still very new, right? So the internet was still kind of taking off. Email wasn't really much of a thing. So what ended up happening was probably that first year and a half at Rutgers, I probably got easily 36 different emails from people who thought I was him. I think eventually people just kind of like got a kick out of it and just started emailing me, thinking that I was him or knowing that I'm me or whatever it was. In any event, this is probably the cause of the imposter syndrome that I do have sometimes, where people, don't think that I am what I am or whatever else like that. As again, I spent years being confused with the other Jeff Seltzer there. So that was interesting. On a side note, or kind of like a little bit of an epilogue to that story, years later, I mean, I'm not Facebook friends or even really connected with the other Jeff Seltzer, but I have, just out of sheer curiosity and probably, I guess, vanity searching myself, have found information on the other Jeff Seltzer who has absolutely since, weirdly, he's changed his name. So I don't know the context behind it, right? Like I was able to find enough information that this is the same person. But for those of you that are watching the video, you'll see here, there's a book by a guy by the name of Yaakov Ephraim Seltzer. Coincidentally or weirdly, that is him. That is the other Jeff Seltzer from Old Bridge that I was confused with years ago. So I guess in the game of track or cross country, he definitely was the winner. But in the game of chicken, when it comes to the name of Jeff Seltzer, I guess 30 years later, I guess I am the king of all Jeff Seltzers from New Jersey. So I guess I have that. I did read the book. If anybody is curious, the book that he wrote is called God is Everywhere, Even Walt Disney World, which is weirdly on brand for this Jeff Seltzer. I did skim the book. Wasn't really my cup of tea. Even though it did have references to Disney World, it wasn't really what I was looking for. But I still thought it was really cool. And again, a nice epilogue to the story. So Jeff Seltzer, if you're out there, or Yaakov Ephraim Seltzer, if you're out there, would love to chat sometime. If you ever want to be a guest on this podcast, if somehow this gets out to you, let me know. Knowing that this podcast does automatically transcribe, maybe if he ever Google searches himself, he'll find this podcast. So again, Yaakov Ephraim Seltzer, come find Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer, and the two Jeff Seltzers can finally have that conversation or whatever it is. Anyhow, if you want to hear more about that, or if you want to add on to the legend of the two Jeff Seltzers, definitely feel free to reach out and talk to me about that. Cool. Second story I wanted to talk about this week, and this is more of just kind of life experiences. So I've been in corporate America now for about 25 years. Corporate America is a very weird place. If you want to see the journey that I've taken, as I always say, go check out my LinkedIn or check out jeffseltzer.com, and you can take a look and see all of the different companies that I've worked for. Some companies I've worked for 2-3 years. My current company I've been at, let's say, on and off for about 8 years. So it varies. Obviously, we are all at-will employees, those of us who work in corporate America, or most of us are. And we all have our reasons for leaving or coming and going, whatever else like that. But specifically, I wanted to talk about the concept or dynamic of getting laid off. So in my 25 years, I've been laid off 3 times. Slight asterisk there. as the first time I was laid off was actually in 1996. So that was before I was truly in corporate America, back when I worked in a restaurant in college. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how each of these different layoffs were different, and I guess how I reacted and kind of like how they all impacted my life in different ways. So uh, getting back to the story, I guess, of I ran cross country junior year of high school. And after running cross country, I decided, you know what, I'm wasting my time with these sports. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not that athletic. I might as well get a job and make some money. So, January of my junior year of high school, I got a job at a restaurant called Sizzler. Um, for those of you that aren't aware, Sizzler back in the, let's say, 80s and 90s was a buffet and steak restaurant. Let's say maybe at the level of Red Lobster, maybe slightly below that. Um, Fairly inexpensive, I guess, for its time. Food was what it was, right? So at the time, I ate it and I thought it was good. I'm sure if I ate it today, I probably wouldn't like it that much, but kind of, take it for what it is. Anyway, so I worked at the Sizzler restaurant in Edison, New Jersey, from January of 1994. And then I worked there for all of half of junior year of high school, all of senior year of high school, and then most of my freshman year of college. I think I took off part of freshman year, but then second semester freshman year, I went back to work there. In June of 1996, Sizzler filed corporate bankruptcy. So basically, what happened was Sizzler was owned, is a corporation, similar to how like Darden owns restaurants, whatever else like that. Well, Sizzler was Sizzler. I think they were exchanged in the stock exchange. There might have been, I think there were some stores that were independently owned, but for the most part, they were mostly owned corporately. In June of 1996, Sizzler filed bankruptcy and abruptly shut down, I think, 2/3 of their stores, including the store that I was at. So at the time, obviously, I was making what I was making. I think I was probably making like $6 an hour, give or take. Got a call. I worked on a Friday, worked on a Saturday, worked on a Sunday. Monday morning, I got a call basically saying, hey, we're officially closed. You're out of a job. Come get your last paycheck and kind of, good luck with your life. So showed up, picked up my paycheck, shook their hand. Weirdly, the paycheck was for the exact number of hours that I was scheduled for the past weekend, because of what I was told, they ran payroll before the weekend happened because they knew it was going to happen. So if somebody had called out of work, as I knew of people who did call out of work, still got a paycheck for their full hours they worked that weekend. So I guess, good news for them. For me, got the paycheck, was what it was. For the most part, I was very early in my work life at that point. I'd only had a couple of jobs till then. Coincidentally, I'd actually just started working at CVS a few weeks before as well. I was working 2 jobs that summer. So with Sizzler closing, basically now I was working 1 job by force, but it worked out well. Increased my hours at CVS and all was good. So first time I ever got laid off was for me a non-issue. Went from Sizzler to CVS and everything was fine. Second time I was laid off was a little different. So according to my LinkedIn, again, I've worked at many different places. In 2015, I was working at Post Foods, so Post Cereal, right? So those of you who know Honey Bunches of Oats, Fruity Pebbles, etc., right? Nice little cereal company. I think we were like number 2 or 3, probably behind Kellogg's and General Mills at the time. Anyhow, in January of 2015, they brought us all together in a town hall or conference room and informed us that we were about to purchase Malt-O-Meal. So those of you who aren't aware of Malt-O-Meal, well, we were the number 3 cereal company. They were probably number 4 or number 5. So if you go into like a grocery store, a Walmart, Target, whatever, and you see like the store brand looking or private label looking bagged cereal, it says Malt-O-Meal on it. That was the company. So we had bought Malt-O-Meal. So we were really excited, right? So we're looking at it saying, okay, great. So we have Fruity Pebbles, we have Honey Bunches of Oats, Great Grains, Raisin Bran. We have another cereal that we can sell. What we were also informed was that they weren't sure what was going to happen because there was a whole campus of people who worked on Malt-O-Meal out in Minnesota. They said, we'll know in a few months what's happening. So obviously we were all a little on edge, but we were like, okay, we bought them, so we assume everything's going to be fine for us. We'll just start selling Malt-O-Meal and life will go on. So May 15th of 2015, they brought us into the same conference room again and informed us that even though we had purchased Malt-O-Meal, we would all be getting laid off. So they said, you guys all have the option. You could either move to, I think it was Lakeview, Minnesota, to work for Malt-O-Meal Post Cereal there, or you can take the package. So obviously lots of different emotions from a lot of different people, right? So some people were crying, which totally get it, right? We're going to have to change. We're going to have to look for a job. getting older and trying to find a job later in your life, later in your career is definitely difficult. You've got to change, find things. We had a good thing going. So obviously for myself, I was a bit of a career crossroads, trying to figure out what does this mean for me, right? So I don't know what's going to happen. About a day or two later, they came to us each with individualized packages that said, okay, here's what your severance is. Here's what we'll pay you basically to stay until a certain end date. So they informed us on May 15th, 2015. And the end dates for people varied between September of 2015 through like March of 2016. So for me, my package said that I would be around until December of 2015. So I was like, okay, so I got to stick around for 6 or 7 months, which, if you don't know much about me, was a challenge going into it, because that basically meant that in theory, my last day with a real job or with a job would be December of 2015, but I couldn't really start job searching right away. As soon as I got the package, I started looking around and applying. So I had a couple interviews in like June and July, and I was like, hey, I'm available in January. They're like, yeah, that's too late. Reach out to us in December. Maybe we'll have some jobs open. Maybe we won't. So my alternative that I could have done was I could have foregone the package they were offering us, which, without giving numbers, the packages they gave us were really, really great. So decent amount of money to basically stay till the end and then just disappear at that point. So I weighed the options back and forth. The money that they were offering us was too much to leave early. So I made the decision to stick around till December to get the package. So as some of you may know, in corporate America, Q4, oftentimes companies have hiring freezes, or basically say, we're not going to hire, let's start again in January. So for myself, when I could actually start looking for a job, it was definitely a difficult time because, October, November, December, I started reaching out, interviewing, talking to recruiters, but they're like, yeah, come back in January or February and we'll start talking, which is a challenge because, if I'm done in December, there's no way that I'm going to have a job on January 1st of the new year. So not necessarily an easy thing to go through, but obviously had to experience it. Mid-December, I still didn't have any real options. I had gotten an offer from a company that's out in like Queens, but they wanted me to go out there like twice a week. And driving from Rockaway, New Jersey to Queens, New York just was not going to happen. Like, I had no interest in it. They didn't offer a 401k match. It just wasn't something I was really interested in. So I got the offer. I said, no, thank you. And kind of, that was it. So mid-December, there was a company that reached out to me. And in, complete disclosure, it's a company that was always on my list of places I would never work. Like, I had always heard nothing but bad things about them. The Glassdoor reviews are not very good. But at that point, I was kind of desperate, let's say. I mean, I had enough money coming in for my package that I could definitely take a decent amount of time off of work. But at the same time, like, I had been working nonstop since 1994, 1993, basically. So for me, mentally, the anxiety it caused is not knowing that I was going to have a job or whatever else like that was too much. So I ended up accepting an offer from that company and went to work there, which in hindsight was not a good idea. And if this were to happen to me again, I would definitely have a different view of it. In those situations, you kind of do what you think is best at the time, but you also try to learn from the situation as well. So long story short, I mean, I left, I was there for about a year or so, and then I went somewhere else because it wasn't for me. Again, I'm not looking to bury anybody. If you want to know what the company's name is, go check my LinkedIn, check out where I worked from 2016 till early 2017. Again, just wasn't my cup of tea. Did make some really good friends there, met some people that are awesome, including one person who I work with now who's amazing, who I helped to bring over from there. But again, in times of desperation, you do, let's say, dumb things sometimes. So, try to take a step back out of the situation and think about what's best for your long-term, I would say. So that was the second time I got laid off. First time, obviously, I had another job already. Second time, out of desperation, I took something else. Third time, which I'm not going to get too much into detail for reasons, was really, really weird. In 2018, I had just gotten promoted into a new role, and it was a new role that just got created. Really excited about it. It was a new thing for me, trying something different, within a company. And about 2 months later, they announced there were going to be some massive layoffs. And even though the role was just created, not just promoted, I was let go. So that was weird. Again, don't really want to get too in detail about that for reasons. I'll probably talk about that maybe in about eight and a half years or so on a podcast, if it still is around. But that one, just to kind of give you a real quick epilogue, ended up working out okay. I ended up getting a 7-month paid vacation. And then the company ended up taking me back afterwards. So life is weird sometimes. It is what it is. Um, Interestingly enough, I would say getting laid off the second time, so when I was at Post Foods, was led me into an interest in personal finance. So I'm not going to go into a huge personal finance diatribe right now because this will probably bore to tears some people. Um, and also, I don't know that I can give it enough justice the amount of time I've left in this podcast, but just want to kind of go in the fact that, for me, I'm an at-will employee in corporate America. I do recognize, as I've experienced multiple times in my career, that at any point they can let me go, or at any point I can let myself go. Right? I can just leave. Um, when you leave a company, or when I leave a company, or I've given notice or quit, generally I have somewhere else to go. So I'm prepared. I understand what's happening. I have a gap that's filled there, so I'm not going to have to worry about getting a paycheck and such. But on the flip side, when a company lets you go, it's generally more on their own terms, and it's also something you're not planning for, right? So when you are job searching, I've been able to find jobs sometimes in like 2 to 3 months. It's taken 6 months to a year sometimes. And when you get let go from corporate America jobs, you don't necessarily always have a decent package coming. Sometimes it's 2 weeks for every year you work there. Sometimes, like when I worked at Post, it was a decent amount more than that. So you can never really prepare for it. So this led me to the interest of personal finance, looking at it and saying, okay, how do I make sure that whatever I have is going to be enough, if I'm ever let go again, but also B, so that I can one day retire. So with that said, I started working on spreadsheets and all sorts of like data modeling and such to get a sense of, based on what I currently have and when I want to retire and how much money I need to get to, like how I would get there and kind of like what the path is, and figure out how much money I have to put aside a year and things like that. So obviously partnering with my wife and talking to Beth about like what we need, making sure we have common goals, whatever else like that, we work together to understand that in personal finance. Long story short, like I said, in a future episode, I'll probably walk through all the personal finance work that I do. But what I did want to do was talk about the fact that in this set of spreadsheets and files that I have, the most important thing that I would say you can do if you ever want to plan out for personal finance is understand where you currently are and where you want to get to. Because understanding where you want to get to definitely helps you to see, what's realistic and what you want to get to, or not sure what's realistic, but it gives you kind of like a light at the end of the tunnel, or like where the journey's going to go. But without knowing where you're currently sitting, it's tough. So at work with friends, whatever else like that, I do often take people on what I call like personal financial seminars. Started off really simple. It's gotten more complicated over the years, but a lot of people have found it to be super helpful. What I would say is the main thing to focus on, at least at the very beginning of your personal financial journey, is understand everything that you have. So many people, myself included, have multiple accounts. So you might have like a 401k from work. You might have a brokerage account where you have investments. You might have a spouse who has something. You might have 401ks or IRAs from previous jobs, etc. So what I would suggest to anybody out there who does all of this is put all the information onto one sheet or one spreadsheet. Oftentimes I've talked to people who make decent money, a lot more than I can even imagine, and they tell me they think they're poor and they can never retire. But then after sitting with them, I walk them through and say, oh, you still have money sitting here, money sitting there, and there's this and that. And they put it all on one sheet of paper and they see like a total at the bottom and they're like, wow, I'm really not poor. Like I have a decent amount of money. So again, not going to get into detail here too much, but I would say the best thing you could do on your personal financial journey is to at least start off and look to see what your total is. I like to look at it in 4 buckets. Short term, so basically any kind of money or investments that you can get out within the next week if you had to. Non-liquid, so if you own your house, if you have a timeshare, things that have a true asset. So I wouldn't say your car, but anything that has a true asset value to it that you could sell in theory if you wanted to and get decent money, put it there. Long term, I generally put like college money for the kids, like 529 funds, IRAs, 401ks. Generally assets or money that you don't plan on touching for like years and years and years, or really can't, right? Because you don't want to touch your retirement money too soon because there's taxes and penalties and whatever else. 4th section, I put in liabilities. So if you have a mortgage, if you have car payments, if you have college student loans, if you have credit card payments, whatever else like that, that would all go there. And at the very bottom, basically that's your net assets. So if you look at your short term plus your non-liquid plus your long term minus your liabilities, that is what I would consider to be like your personal value. Now, I don't mean personal value in terms of what you like or what makes you tick. I'm talking more personal value in terms of if you want to benchmark what you're worth or like how much you have in assets. I think that's probably enough for now. Again, this is a bit of a teaser, I guess, in personal finance. We'll have an episode in the future. I'm sure, be more video based and I can walk you through the spreadsheets. But for right now, just wanted to kind of start off and kind of tease that a little bit. If anybody has any questions on personal finance or any advice, reach out to me. Let me know. Again, with friends and family and such, I'm more than willing to go through one-on-one seminars. I do them for free. I don't look to make any money off of it. And I'm only basically just sharing, what I've done through this journey so far. Is it perfect? No. Have I made mistakes over the years? Absolutely. But what I do is I try to learn as much as I can, talk to as many people as I can. And if I learn one thing from each conversation, I see it as a win, apply it, and keep moving forward. So that was that. Wanted to kind of end off or close off the show with a conversation on favorite TV shows. So a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking about it, and I was like, okay, what are my favorite TV shows of all time? So as I was trying to make a list for myself, I reached out, if some of you saw it, over my Instagram stories to see what other people's favorite shows are. So before giving my list, I wanted to kind of walk through what other people had suggested, and we'll talk through in terms of what their shows are. So if any of these shows are interesting to you, obviously look them up. Years ago, it would have been tougher, but nowadays with streaming, probably 95% of these shows are available on some streaming service somewhere. So definitely check it out. Jamie Romano, sister of Stephanie Romano, who was a guest a few weeks ago. Both her and her husband's favorite show of all time is The Office. Amazing show. Jamie Day, absolutely spot on. Tracy, who is Stephanie's wife, talked to her about it as well. She had said Friends. To be honest, I never actually saw that much of Friends. So Friends was big when I was in college. When I was in college, cable wasn't really available in the dorm, didn't have TV. So I think I missed most of that. I've tried getting into it over the years. There's a sandwich shop near my house that always plays during lunch. I've seen episodes here and there, but it's just never really stuck with me, I guess. So maybe one day. It's on HBO Max, I think, so I should check it out. John Ceballos, he said How to Make It in America and New York Undercover. I'm not too familiar with either of those shows, but if you are, definitely check them out. Gabby, her favorite shows are Alias, which I never saw, and Parks and Rec, which Parks and Rec I thought was really, really good for most of the time. I think I ended up bailing a few seasons before it was over, and then weirdly tried watching the series finale, and there's so much to change at that point that it really didn't mean anything to me. I didn't understand. Steve, my buddy Steve Fatt, he loves The Sopranos. Great show. Everybody Hates Chris, another awesome one. Fresh Off the Boat, that's one that is on my list, and I want to watch it at some point, but I never ever got to it. Lauren, she enjoys Lost. Lost is another show, kind of like Parks and Rec, which I thought was amazing. Beth and I talk about it all the time. Like the first episode, which came out like 2004, feels like a movie. Like for 2004, the level of like visuals and the storytelling was amazing. Lost, I think, went on way too long, too many seasons. I think at some point they said they're going to have two more seasons and then a movie. The 2 seasons I thought were subpar, and the movie never made it. So I guess it kind of is what it is. My friend Chelsea, her favorite shows are Avatar: Last Airbender, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Community. Avatar, I believe, is an anime. I've never watched it. Buffy, I think Beth watched that at some point. And Community, I've seen episodes. I've tried getting into it, never really stuck with me, but everybody I've talked to that's enjoyed it has enjoyed it. Guess that makes sense. Talked to Gina today. Gina said her favorite shows are Gilmore Girls, which coincidentally Beth and my older daughter Robin are binging right now. Dawson's Creek, another solid one. Gossip Girl, never watched that. Beverly Hills 90210. So she enjoyed both the original and the reboot that happened. Seinfeld, that's one that's a classic. I think that one premiered a few years before I went to college, so I saw like half of it then. And I think I've watched most of them either in syndication, because for years it was always on like 11 o'clock at night and such. And This Is Us. This Is Us is one that I tried watching. My challenge with This Is Us was that it was not like linear enough, right? So it was kind of jumping all over the place. I love the casting. Mandy Moore had the guy from Heroes, some other people as well. Beth watched it. She enjoyed it a lot. Definitely a solid show of what I've heard. Just wasn't my cup of tea. And then today I asked Robin, my older daughter, what her favorite shows were or are. So she had said she's a huge fan of Glee, which her and I actually binged Glee a couple of years ago straight through. So when Glee first came on the air, because I love music, I love cover songs, I thought this was completely going to be awesome. When it first came on the air, I think I watched the first season by myself. Actually, me and Beth watched the first couple episodes. She bailed shortly. I watched the first season or season and a half. I tried multiple times to come back and watch Glee again. Never really got into it. But when Robin was in middle school, I got her to watch Pitch Perfect, one of my favorite movies. Amazing movie. She loved it. So based on her love of that, I got her to watch Glee, and then the two of us we binged all the seasons of Glee together. The highs, the lows, definitely some great spots, definitely some episodes you could have missed. Um, Overall, a fun show. I mean, great cover songs. The cover of "Alone by Heart" I think is one of my favorite covers of all time. So good, really really great. They had some great guests. I mean, Kristen Chenoweth, Idina Menzel, lots of awesome great singers and guests that came on. Neil Patrick Harris. I mean, him singing "Dream On" was amazing. Great song. Stranger Things, something that as a family we do watch together. WandaVision, that was a fun one. That was, I think, the first or one of the first Disney Plus Marvel shows. Not sure if anybody remembers. The first couple episodes were really slow, and then all of a sudden things started happening. Really fun though. Really enjoyed that one. High School Musical, the series, another one of her favorites. I have zero real context to that. She enjoys it. Allison watches it as well. And the original Punky Brewster. I think she also tried watching the animated series as well as the reboot of Punky, but she loves the original Punky Brewster, which is awesome. Beth took them through it for years. I think Robin was wearing two different colored shoes because she wants to be just like Punky. So it's adorable, right? Love to hear it. So with all that said, that's a lot of listener input, which I really appreciate. So everybody who did reach out and let me know about those, thank you so much. So with that said, I wanted to walk through my favorite shows of all time in no particular order, right? You'll hear these, and some of them are very different than others, but wanted to kind of walk through my favorite shows. So first show I'd mention is The Office. Jamie and Danny mentioned that as their favorite show. I mean, The Office is so good. I've re-binged it multiple times. Granted, I think the last few seasons are probably, let's say, not as good as the beginning. I don't want to spoil it too much, but there was one part, probably about 2/3 or 3/4 through the series, that I think it really did jump the shark and was what it was. But with that said, I've still watched the show probably 3 or 4 times straight through. Amazing. When I used to do half marathon training, I would watch that while running on the treadmill, which was great. The Shield. So not sure if any of you have heard about it. I think it was from 2002. It was on FX. Great show starring Michael Chiklis, Walton Goggins. Lots of great people on the show. Really, like one of the first shows that really felt real. Like the way that we filmed it was very different. You never knew it was going to happen. For 2002, for like basic cable, it was very graphic, which was just shocking to me at the time. And it's one show that I would say never jumped the shark. So even up until the season finale or the series finale, it was amazing. And I'd say it probably has one of, if not the best series finales of all time. Like it just stuck with its original stories. It stuck with, what it stood for. And it's just amazing. So I would say if you get a chance, if you've never heard about it before, watch The Shield, watch a couple episodes. It's fantastic. Arrested Development. So not sure how many of you have seen it or heard of it. If you haven't really done much of either, I wouldn't blame you. It was on Fox, I think back in like 2005, 2006. The commercials were awful. So when it was originally on live on the air, I didn't watch it. Like the commercials looked bad. I had zero interest in it. So many great actors in the show: Jason Bateman, Jeffrey Tambor, Will Arnett, Michael Cera. So many different people. So many different guest stars. It's probably the smartest and funniest show I think I've ever watched ever. With that said, the first 3 seasons are amazing. Like I absolutely loved it. It was so great. And then it was off the air for a while. And then Netflix came back and made like 2 or 3 more seasons. I would say at the time I was super excited that it was going to come back. But then when Netflix made it, I was a lot less excited. So definitely watch the first 3 seasons of Arrested Development if you haven't already. As for seasons 4 and 5, you could probably skip them if you want, or if you want, to be a completist, definitely check that one out. The Wonder Years. So The Wonder Years is one of my favorite shows of all time, more for nostalgia purposes. So I think it debuted, I want to say like 89 or 90, give or take. Wonder Years was a TV show set in like the late 1960s, starring Fred Savage. Kevin Arnold was the main character. And it's basically about him growing up and learning about life, right? Like girlfriends, friends, parents, puberty, all sorts of stuff. Now, for me, I think what really stuck with me was the fact that like I was roughly the same age as him on that show. So I don't remember what age he was when the show started, but I was probably about a year younger than him. So a lot of the stuff he was going through, I mean, obviously, it's TV, so a little more exaggerated. Myself and my friends were going through similar situations as well in terms of understanding and learning things, whatever. So for me, it just really clicked with me, and I really enjoyed it. Fun show. I believe it's on Hulu or Disney Plus or somewhere at this point. So if you get a chance, if you've never watched it before, watch a few episodes. You don't necessarily need to watch it straight through. It had great music as well, which was super helpful. So absolutely loved that show. Lastly, and this is why earlier on I said that about 95% of these shows are on streaming somewhere, is a show called The Norm Show. So Norm Macdonald, one of my favorite comedians of all time. You may know him from Saturday Night Live years ago. He's done lots of different things. Dirty Work, one of my favorite movies of all time. He had a show on ABC, I don't know, it was like maybe 15, 20 years ago called The Norm Show. Ridiculous concept. I think the concept was he was a pro hockey player who got busted for drugs or steroids or something. And so his community service was he had to work at a social office of some kind and help people out and such like that. And if anybody knows Norm Macdonald, he's probably not the right person to do that. So everything would end up and work out the way that you think it would. This is a show that I would absolutely go out of my way to find. I'm not one that would ever say go stream illegal media anywhere, but if you can find an episode or two on YouTube or anywhere for that matter, I say definitely look it up. Amazing show. Absolutely love it. Lots of humor. There are episodes that I've watched multiple times, and I'm almost crying. I'm laughing so hard. So that was that. Anyhow, that is it for this week's solo pod. I hope you enjoyed it. Do you think that I'll probably do a few more of these in the future? I'm not sure how often. This was for episode 10. I don't know if it's going to be every 10, every 5, every whatever, insert the number here. We'll see. I guess it'll be a combination of how easy it is to find guests going forward and if I have any content or ideas to talk about. Again, so definitely reach out on Instagram at Everybody Has a Story Pod. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you want to add anything. Let me know your thoughts. I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn. With that said, I want to remind everybody, again, we are on all podcast platforms that I know are available. Again, Pandora was new this week, which was pretty awesome. Additionally, if you want to be a guest on a future episode, reach out to me on Instagram at Everybody Has a Story Pod. Definitely DM me. Outside of that, thanks for joining. Hope you all have a great week, and we will see you next week. Take care, guys. Peace.